Hi there, my name is Tonya Poole, and I'm here with the Magic of SelfLove video series, which is all about me interviewing some amazing women who will share what self-love is to them and how it has the power to transform your life. So today I have with me Niajallah Hendrix-Wilson, the founder of Indigos Cultural Art Centers, and Mama J, Jamillah Neeairah of Women's Work Consulting Group. So we're going to talk about the magic of self-love and how it has the power to transform your life the way it has transformed ours. So, ladies, how are you doing today?
Good.
There you are.
Thank you for asking.
Good, and you look good too.
Oh, well, thank you.
Let me ask you, how would you define self-love?
Let's see. I equate self-love with self-worth. In order to have self-love, you must know that you're worthy of the love. I often find that when we speak of love, many people don't love themselves, so they don't know how to receive the love. Love is one of those terms, or self-love is one of those terms where one has to do a lot of reflection throughout their journey of womanhood to figure out what that looks like. We have a lot of examples through our parents and family members, but then at some point we have to define it for ourselves. So that would be mine.
Well, I think I agree with that, because in the course of my own life, as I've been paying attention to, like I've been reading my journals recently from when I was younger, and I think it has evolved. My idea of what self-love is, of course, has evolved as I have, and I think that's a good thing, because what you find is, you know, what you thought was the image of who you are, it evolves and changes. Then you say, wait a minute, that wasn't really loving what I did there.
Right.
What I did there wasn't really loving of myself. And as you learn more, you evolve your idea and you change and you say, okay, this is loving, but this isn't.
Right.
You know? So I think it's one of those things that it's very fluid.
Yes.
The identity and the definition of it is very fluid.
Yes.
But I think if you're not paying attention as you go throughout the stages, then you kind of miss the opportunity to love yourself.
See, this is why I interviewed both of you, because you're so awesome. One of the things that I included in my book, The Magic of Self-Love, was something that you just said, was I would look at other women and say, well, how come they don't love themselves? Because I would see how awesome they are, how beautiful they are, how talented or smart that they are. But when I reviewed my own life and I looked at the decisions that I made in my life, I looked back and I said, oh, that wasn't so loving, or that relationship wasn't the best one to be in, or why did I choose that career, that job, you know? And when I reviewed my choices and the decisions that I made, I realized that it was not grounded in self-love.
Right.
And so that prompted me to begin to examine my own self-love, and to also look at women who I felt were exuding or living out their own version of self-love. And you're right, I do agree that as you get older, you become more intentional about that, and how you define that for yourself.
And that's the key term, intentional. I believe that in order to really understand your self-love and your self-worth, you have to be very intentional, because you can literally go throughout your whole life never knowing that you didn't love on yourself.
For real.
So if you don't take the time to reflect, to look in your journals, to take intentional self-cares, like bathing once a week in a nice soothing bath with all herbs and essential oils and crystals, or one day deciding in the morning that you want to go to the beach with no one and you want to share in that moment in the ocean and you, and let y'all love on you. Maybe you want to go to the river and just kind of learn what that feeling feels like, the flowing of the waters. So it's these things that I feel that oftentimes we put a lot of people in our space a lot to fill up the things that we're looking for to have in ourselves. So self-love, and it's really dealing with finding yourself genuinely without having anyone define that for you.
So then would you say that self-love is ever evolving?
Yes.
Constantly.
Always.
And I think that when we talk about what it looks like, today it's going to look different than tomorrow, right?
Yes.
It's like I've noticed that like today loving myself might be just sitting behind door number 1 with number 1. It's like don't anybody bother me. But tomorrow my self-love might be for me hanging out with my girls, because I need that kind of exchange, energy exchange. So it really is a matter of you being, as you say, intentional and really deciding what does it look like right now in this now moment. What does it look like for me?
You know, you just gave me a really good reflection as a practitioner of Yoruba culture and also priestess of Egyptian cosmology. You made me realize something in this moment, and that is, you know, our self-love is as vast as the ocean, like Yamoya. Our womanist flow is like that of Oshun, right? And then in Oya, right, we flow like the wind. So it's this kind of steps that we go through in our womanist walk, the divine mothers who kind of decide who we are. And then, you know, in the Kemetic culture is that Oshun, it's Heteru, Aset, and then it's that Ma'at, right? Because Ma'at needs to balance you out,
that's
right? And bring forth that peace and that faith in yourself, that you can,
that you will find it,
exactly, that you can be loving on yourself. When you were talking about earlier, the concept of redefining yourself and loving on yourself, I immediately thought the person I wrote down when I was like a teenager, who I was going to marry and who I was going to love on, right?
We all did that.
Exactly. This is completely different.
Okay. Did y'all play the MASH game where it's MASH?
Yes.
Mansion, apartment. How many children you're going to have? Where you're going to live? Yeah.
I didn't really knew that existed. I wish I did. I probably would have been better with my chart. But, you know, I was just thinking about that, just that mere fact and the journey of self-love. You know, when you were younger, I think it's awesome. This is how you really know you're on the right journey. When you meet someone and they say, I knew you were going to become the person you are now.
Yeah.
I think that's
happened
awesome
to me a lot lately. And you know, it's so funny because, like, I have friends that are, like, you know, from other places where I've lived in my life, and they'll call me and be like, I see what you're doing on Facebook.
Yes.
I see what you're doing. That seems just like what you would be doing, like with the gardening.
And that's so interesting that you say that, because it's like people saw things in you that you didn't see in yourself.
Yeah.
You know, because I get the same thing. Like, people say, oh, I see what you're doing now, and it seems like something you would do all along. Like, I knew you would do that when you were 15, you know? And it's just like, wow, you knew that? Why didn't you tell me that?
But see, that goes back to the self-love. And that's a part of the journey. How the journey, I think oftentimes we are reflections of our authentic selves as we walk, right? And a lot of times sometimes we get to a point where we're trying to be very intentional on the person that we personify,
as opposed to who we really are.
So how we really feel too about ourselves, but other people see it. So then they get the chance to see your authentic self while you're living in this personification of this other person.
Right.
But they get to see you,
and you don't
because you're trying to be this. Exactly. You don't even realize it, because you're trying to be this really this really admired and honored person when you become really intentional in your walk, and you realize that there are some things that you need to change about yourself, and you're so busy worried about your flaws, you don't recognize that people see your beauty.
That's right.
It's an interesting journey.
That's right.
Well, I've been talking to older women, especially. I've been telling you about this project that I'm working on, where I've been talking to older black women who are, I'm moving into the 50s, and so that made me start thinking about, well, what do I have to be doing at this stage in order to get to be this really super grounded and fantastic, elder? Because I think that we don't just arrive at eldership and we're suddenly created awesome. I think it's a process, and I think there's a bit of something that must be done, a seed that must be planted now, right? So I've been asking questions of women who are like in their 60s and their 70s, and I've been having a lot of conversations with my own mom and other women in my family, and just asking them, who did you think you think you wanted to be? What kind of elder were you trying to actually become? What did you do when you were 40s and in your 50s so that you could get to the place where you would actually arrive? And are you really, now that you're there, are you where you thought you would be, or are you, did the journey go the way you intended? And very often I'm told that it wasn't what I expected, but I'm happy with where I landed, and so I think that's with us too,
Yeah. I'm so glad that you brought that point in. Of course, now we're like way off script, and that's fine, because I knew this was going to happen. But because I'm in my 30s now, and when you're younger, when you're in high school age, and even in your 20s, you have this vision of what your 30s will look like. And I can't say that it's matching my vision. But at the same time, when you're 20 or 18 years old, you may not have a full understanding of what being in your 30s will look like.
Exactly.
And so the women that you are speaking with now, who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s and on up, had to plan to be 60 and 70 and 80 when they were 30 and 40 and 50.
And that's I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking the exact same thing. I was thinking, you know, one of the things about the woman that's walking and the magic of self-love, especially for African American women, I would say, because that's my studying women in trauma. I think that in order to really begin the process of understanding who we want to become and find our authentic selves, we really have to reflect on that in our 30s and 40s. It's something that happens when you become in your 30s. It's something that clicks and says, okay, preparation time.
Yeah.
You know, in your 20s it's still like youthfulness. You know that you still got some mistakes you can make. But something happens as soon as you get that 30, it's almost you feel like you old. You know, you're just like, you know, so for some, they begin to have babies because they realize they're closer to the death cycle than the life cycle.
Right.
So they decided, okay, well, I want to have babies. And for others, they realize, okay, I'm done with that. So now let's go to the next chapter and start preparing for, you know, my eldership. But eldership is another thing that's very intentional as a woman. And for African American women, we have to prepare for that more, I think, because of the fact that we have a lot of crossroads and barriers that tends to be, I mean, one is being black, the other one is being a woman, the other one is sometimes being a single parent, the other one is so many things.
And then those traumas that you're
the traumas that you've experienced, and that overlays what you will become and who you will become. You know, that trauma is serious when you are not intentional to heal from it.
So I'm so glad that you talked about trauma and healing of African American women, because just a week ago we had the honor and the privilege of presenting at the RIMBA conference for North Carolina A&T State University. Aggie Pride. You have to say it. And so the focus of the conference is dealing with women. This year's conference was, well, for us, we were talking about women, African American women, and how we heal from trauma. But the conference in and of itself is all about mental health and rehabilitation among various different ethnic groups. So how would you say that self-love plays a role in the healing of women from traumatic experiences?
It's everything. It's everything. In order for you to really define yourself as a woman, specifically an African American woman, and it's a lie. If anyone says that they have never experienced trauma, as an African American. Now, I'm only speaking as an African American. Not everyone has experienced trauma, but if you are an African American, you in this country, you experience trauma. Trust me. And so sometimes people, you know, when I host these healing wheel retreats for women that you all have been so privileged to, and I love to have you, and I had the privilege of having you beautiful ladies there to assist me in various different ways. I think it's always interesting how the question on our assessment, one is, have you ever experienced trauma? Most of the time it's yes. But the other thing is that a lot of the times people do not have cultural traditions. I find on the assessment that one, people don't know, not familiar with culture, and two, they don't have traditions held in their families that they could think of that's cultural.
Okay.
Right. So what I'm saying is that they're in the magic of self-love and dealing with the healing process through trauma. There's two parts to it. One is rediscovering of self and self-love. But two, you have to have a cultural background, a foundation to get that, though. You can't, it doesn't come out of nowhere. That's not how it works. So you really would have to research your own family, your own accolades that you have made in your family. So one of the things that we do during the Healing Wheel Retreat is make that a requirement as a part of the journey, is to learn about yourself through a genogram. The genogram is a little bit different than a roots tree. The roots information is just literally learning who your family is in the tree. But this time, you know, with the genogram, you learn about who your family members are, who they were, and what they went through. You know, mental health and wellness stuff, as well as their spiritual journey, and their contributions to society. So you find out all of that in a genogram. And one of the things that I thought was so beautiful, getting back to my point, was that when I found out that my great grandfather has a school named after him in Arkansas, Little Rock, and he also has a higher level of a degree. He and his wife were both educators. I never heard that story. I never even knew that existed. I thought I was the only person that cared about education in my family, you know. And so I thought it was the coolest thing to find out. Or how on my mother's side, I never thought that I never understood this business drive, this entrepreneurship thing that I've had all my life. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur when I was like 12. I was like, I'm gonna own my own stuff, you know. I knew that. And it's so crazy when I talk to a fifth cousin in Louisiana on my mother's side that tells me, oh, you don't know that the Colemans own land. We have when y'all come on down, Esther.
Wow.
That's how they talk to me.
Wow.
We're going to take you to the clubs and the stores that we own in the community.
That's amazing, because a lot of times we come here and we think that we're the first ones to have these great ideas and these dreams and goals that we want to have, and then we find out someone way back in the story, you know, great grandma so and so was doing the same thing. And if those stories aren't passed down,
then you miss so much.
We miss so much, and we struggle so much in trying to find ourselves. And that self-love piece. Family.
And speaking of that, I was thinking about how my mom, we were talking about healing through trauma. My mother has 8 children, and as you all know, I work in birth. I do birth work, and I've been a doula for 15 plus years, and that's what I love, and I teach childbirth education. But one day I was talking to my mother, I guess after I had been doing this work for maybe at least 10 years at the time. She said to me, you know, every time I had each one of you all, I was alone when I was having my babies, and it was such a traumatic experience. And I always kept saying, if there was just somebody here to hold my hand and really just kind of be with me, I felt like I would be okay if somebody was just there. She said, and I never thought about how you fulfilled for somebody else something that I wanted. So sometimes a living ancestor, you see what I'm talking about? Sometimes you can get that same. It's like if you just listen to the stories of your own family members as they're starting to talk to you about their own traumas, because you know, we don't often think of birth as being a traumatic experience, which is something that we explored in the RIMBA conference, you know, when we were talking to the practitioners about the importance of being aware of that. But so that's the thing that when my mother shared that story with me, that's probably what started me on thinking about the many traumas that we face during the birthing moments. You know what I mean? That we don't always think of, and we don't think of them as things that need to be healed. That we need to be healed from.
And you know what I hear also is that you become the person that helps someone in their own self-love journey. Because when you're in that birth room, I mean, imagine if someone was there to hold your mother's hand, how that would have empowered her. You know, and so sometimes, even though self-love is cultivated within, sometimes we do need that spark from someone without, you know, someone outside of ourselves to help us, you know, to say, okay, this is what self-love looks like. Okay, now here you go. Now here are the reins. You got it from here. You take it from here. So I have a segment in my book that's called The Tragedy of the Hair Bows, and I won't go into it here because I want people to actually read it, but it's a situation that happened when my daughter was about 5 years old, when she had some hair bows. It was one of those days where everything was going wrong. And I just flipped out, for lack of better words. Just that moment of just, you know, as a mother, when you're balancing so many things, this is what it really boils down to. When you're a mother and you're balancing so many things, you're balancing your child's welfare, you're balancing your own welfare, your bills, your car, just everything in life. And all of that came to a head on this particular day. So I want you to speak on how your own self-love, your own demonstration of self-love impacts those around you, such as your children, especially your children, because I think that they really learn how to love themselves from us first.
Well, I'm going to let Jay go first because I got to think about that one.
Well, let me just tell you that, you know, I've been talking to my daughters, especially Imani and Rekaya, as Imani's on her way to college. And we have these very heart-to-heart conversations in the morning, and a lot of it is about, you know, what I want her to take away from my life, so when she leaves for college, she'll have some things. But, you know, I think the best thing I could have given her is the ability to know how to cultivate deep relationships with other sisters, right? Because I'm showing her that when you love yourself, you surround yourself with people that love you too. right? That's so very important. And they keep you balanced, and you keep them balanced. So really the best thing that you could possibly do for yourself as a black woman, in my opinion, is to get with a crew that loves on you, that you can love back, you know, where there's some reciprocity, and your children are watching that, because I don't think that as black women we get through this world alone.
I agree. So we were talking about off camera a little bit about how our children sometimes see our journey. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have our children with us to say, okay, watch how mama does what she does, and they learn self-love through that. Sometimes it's unintentional, you know, because they're a part of our lives. They're just there.
Right.
And so how is that self-love passed down, or what kind of self-love is passed down when there's an unintentional carrying along of the children, or the children are in your presence, but there's no intentional discussion about self-love, as we hear the beautiful birds in the background?
Well, I think for me, it's like whether you say, look what mommy is doing or not, I think that your children are always paying attention to you. I mean, you're the first model of womanness, the first woman that they ever know and really interact with. So my feeling is that they're going to always be paying attention to the nuances of what you say and what you don't say, right? So I think it's a thing where, you know, now it's good to be an interpreter of what they're looking at, you know, because I think that we're also our children's first interpreter of the world. So I think it's one of those things where you do have to be, you have to say, well, what did you think about whatever you saw here? You know, what do you think about this? And, you know, now let's have that dialogue. Now that my daughters are 18 and 19 respectively, and 16 almost, 16, my baby.
Can't believe it.
So now that we're having these kind of conversations, I'm actually able to get them to interpret, well, here's what I thought happened, and I can say, well, it wasn't this, it was that. You know what I mean? So that they can kind of take those nuggets with them and do what they need to do.
Right. And off camera, what I was stating, what we were, I think Jay is definitely on point with that one. I would only add to that, you know, for me, because I had such a traumatic experience with my mother, and because she was one of those people who was behind door number one, as Jay say so well, I really didn't have the opportunity of knowing who she was as a woman. So then when I had two girls, I have made it very intentional for them to pass on, for them to know what my walk, and also to make sure that they carry my walk, I guess, if you will. I'm a traditionalist, so there's parts of my spiritual journey that I want them to have and carry it in their lives too. Like Jay being an herbalist, you know, often giving her children her herbal regimens when they need something. It would be awesome if one of them took it up and said, I'm going to be that woman too. You know, and I think that's important in our journey, that someone has to take the baton and keep the legacy going in the family.
Well, we had a wonderful time during this interview, and I want to thank you so much for participating in the Magic of Self-Love video series. I think that this is what a lot of the things that you all said is going to be so majorly impactful to the viewers of the interview, and I want to thank you all for joining in and tuning in. If you could leave me a comment below to let me know how this video has impacted you. What does self-love look like to you? How do you define it, and how do you live it? I would love to hear your comments and your feedback on that. Until next time, please visit me at TonyaPoole.com, where you can pre-order the book The Magic of Self-Love, and if you order during the pre-sale period, which ends on May 21st, 2016, you will also get a free copy of my ebook The Magic of Self-Care. Until next time, peace and love.